Only a few days passed, and Wei Wuxian realized that he might have made a wrong choice. The donkey that he conveniently picked up was too hard to please. Although it was only a donkey, it would exclusively eat fresh young grass with dewdrops still hanging off them. If the tip of the grass had a streak of yellow, it wouldn't eat it. Passing a farm, Wei Wuxian stole some wheat straws to feed it, but after chewing them, it spit it out with a thud, even louder than that of its human counterparts. If it didn't eat high-quality food, it wouldn't budge, and it'd lose its temper and kick around. For multiple times, Wei Wuxian was almost kicked by it. Aside from that, its brays also sounded extremely horrible to the ear. It was useless no matter as a mount or a pet. Wei Wuxian couldn't help but to think of his sword. The sword was probably collected by the leader of a prominent clan and would have hanged on a wall as a trophy that they could show other people. After pushing and pulling along for a few blocks, the road reached a vast farmland of some village. Under the scorching sun, there was a large pagoda tree and thick, green grass underneath it. Beside the tree, there was an old well with a barrel and a dipper on the side, placed there by the farmers for any passerby to quench their thirst. The donkey ran over there, and nothing could make it leave. Wei Wuxian hopped down and slapped its honored buttocks. "You're definitely destined for wealth, even harder to please than me." The donkey spat at him. While they fooled around aimlessly, a group of people approached from within the field. The people carried handmade bamboo baskets and wore cotton clothes and straw sandals, emitting the rustic airs of rural villages. In the group, there was a young girl with a round face that could be considered delicate. Possibly because of walking for too long under the sun, they also wanted to come over to rest by the shade and have some water. However, seeing that there was a wild donkey tied to the tree and a lunatic with heavy makeup and disheveled hair, they were reluctant to go over. Wei Wuxian had always thought of himself as one who was courteous towards women, so he moved over, emptying some space, and went to struggle with the donkey. After realizing that he was harmless, the people were finally at ease to come over. All of them were drenched in sweat and had ruddy cheeks. Some were fanning themselves and some fetching water. The girl sat by the well and smiled at Wei Wuxian as if she knew that he purposely moved away. One of the people held a compass in his hand. He looked into the distance and then lowered his head questioningly. "We are already at the foot of Dafan Mountain? So why hasn't the pointer started moving yet?" The designs and pointer on the compass looked strange, indicating that it wasn't a normal compass. It wasn't one that showed the north, south, east and west, but one that showed the directions malicious creatures, also known as a compass of evil. Wei Wuxian realized that this was probably a poor cultivation clan from the countryside. Aside from highbrow, affluent clans, there were also smaller clans like this who closed their doors and cultivated on their own. Wei Wuxian thought that they might have left their village to either find a clan whom they were distant relatives to or to go night hunting. The middle-aged man leading the group called for people to take a drink and replied, "Your compass might be broken. I'll get you a new one later. Dafan Mountain is less than 10 miles ahead of us, which means that we cannot rest here for long. We have struggled through the whole journey, and if we relax now and fall behind with other people beating us to it wouldn't have been worth it." As expected, it was a night hunt. A lot of refined cultivation clans called traveling to places and exercising evil beings as hunting. Because of how these creatures often appear at night, it was also called night hunting. There were countless cultivation clans, but only a few were distinguished. Without the contributions from its ancestors, if an average clan wanted to become famous and receive respect in the cultivation world, it would have to show its abilities. Only if a clan captured a fierce monster or a terrorizing being could it have then been treated seriously. This was originally Wei Wuxian's specialty area. However, during the days of traveling, he destroyed a few graves but only found small ghosts. He happened to need a ghost soldier to do evil for him, and decided to go to Rice Mountain to try his luck. If he found a good one, he'd capture it and put it to use. After the group of people finished resting, they prepared to move on. Before they left, the round-faced girl took a small, partly ripened apple out of a basket and handed it to him. "Here you go." Wei Wuxian extended his hand to receive it, grinning broadly, but the donkey also opened its mouth and bit at it. Wei Wuxian quickly took the apple away. Seeing that the donkey craved the apple so much, he thought of a good idea. He gathered a long stick and a fishing thread, hanged the apple on one end, and dangled it in front of the donkey. The donkey smelled the apple's refreshing scent from in front of him and wanted to eat it, chasing the apple which was always a centimeter away from him. Its speed was faster than the best horses Wei Wuxian had ever seen, leaving only dust behind it. Without stopping, Wei Wuxian arrived at Dafan Shan before dark. Upon arriving at the foot of the mountain, he finally realized that the fan wasn't the one he thought it was. It got its name because looking from far away, the mountain looked like a kind, chubby Buddha. There was a small town below the mountain named Buddha's Feet. The number of cultivators who gathered here were far more than what he had expected. Everything was a jumble, with people from different sects and clans walking down the streets, all in uniforms of different colors, almost blinding to the eye. For some reason, all of them wore distressed expressions. Nobody bothered to laugh at him even though they saw his strange appearance. In the center of the long street, a group of cultivators gathered, talking in serious tones. It seemed as if their opinions differed greatly. even from afar, Wei Wuxian could hear them talking. In the beginning, everything was fine, but they suddenly became agitated. I think that there are no soul-consuming beasts or spirits in the area at all. It's clear that none of the compasses of evil showed anything. If there isn't, then how did the 7 people lose their souls? They couldn't have all attained the same disease, could they? I, for one, haven't heard of this disease at all. Even if the compass of evil is not showing anything, does it mean that there's nothing in the area? It can only point out an approximate direction without any specific. So it shouldn't be fully trusted. Maybe there's something here that can interfere with the pointer's direction. Do you remember who created the compass of evil? I've never heard of anything that can interfere with its pointer's direction. What do you mean? Are you implying anything with that tone of yours? Of course I know that Wei Yang created the compass of evil. But it's not as if his creations are flawless. Aren't we allowed the option of doubt at least? I never said that you can't doubt it, much less his creations are flawless. So why accuse me? And so their argument had turned to another direction. Wei Wuxian passed them on his donkey, giggling and laughing. He didn't expect that after so many years had passed, he was still alive in the cultivator's conversations. This was the so-called much ado about Wei. If there was ever a poll to find out whose popularity was the most lasting in the cultivation world, the winner would be no other than Wei Wuxian. To be honest, the cultivator wasn't wrong. The compasses of evil in use today was the first version that he made and were indeed not specific enough. He was in the middle of making improvements when his den was destroyed, so he had to put everyone through the inconvenience of using the imprecise version 1. Anyways, creatures that ate blood and flesh were usually low in level, such as walking corpses. Only the more refined high-level monsters or ghosts were capable of eating and digesting souls. This one ate 7 at once. No wonder so many clans had gathered here. Since the prey was by no means a trivial matter, it was inevitable for the compasses of evil to make mistakes. Wei Wuxian reined in the rope and hopped off the donkey's back, holding the apple, which has been ahead of it for the whole journey, in front of its mouth. One bite only. Are you trying to eat my whole hand with this one bite of yours? He ate a few bites from the other side of the apple and stuffed it back into the donkey's mouth, pondering upon how he came down to the point of sharing an apple with a donkey, when suddenly someone bumped into his back. He turned around to see a girl. Although she bumped into him, she didn't acknowledge him at all. Her eyes were dull and she had a smile on her face, staring into the distance without blinking. Wei Wuxian followed his gaze and saw the dense mountain top of Dafan Mountain. All of a sudden, the girl started dancing in front of him without saying anything. The dance was wild, with her arms flinging about savagely. Wei Wuxian was watching the performance with keen pleasure when a woman ran over, lifting her dress slightly. She embraced the girl and cried, "Iron, let's go back! Let's go back!" Iron brushed her off with force, her smile still unfaded, creating a terrifying sort of affection, and continued to dance. The woman had to chase her down the street, sobbing while running. A street vendor on the side spoke. "How awful! Iron from blacksmith Chen's family had escaped again. It must be horrible for her Amam. Iron, Iron's husband, and her husband, all of them were..." Vaivushin wandered around, piecing together the strange event that happened here from picking up on different people's conversations. On Dafan mountain, there was a burial ground. Most of the ancestors of the townspeople from Buddha's feet were buried here, and sometimes unidentifiable corpses would also receive a spot and a wooden plaque here. A few months ago, in a dark and stormy night, the wind and the rain caused a piece of land on Dafan mountain to slide and collapse, which happened to be the burial ground. Many old graves were destroyed, and a few coffins were exposed to the air and struck by lightning, causing both the corpses and the coffins to be charred black. The townspeople of Buddha's feet were extremely uneasy. After a few rounds of prayers, they rebuilt the burial ground again, assuming that everything would be just fine. However, ever since then, people in the town started to lose their souls. The first one was a sluggard. He was a poor wretch, loafing about and doing no work at all. Because he loved to hike on the mountain and catch birds, he happened to be struck in the mountain during the night of the landslide. He was frightened to death, but luckily he was safe. The peculiar thing was that after a few days he suddenly married someone. His wedding was quite large, and he said that he wanted to be charitable from now on and settle down. On the night of the wedding, he was completely drunken, having never woken up ever since he lay on the bed. The bride didn't receive an answer as she called him. Only when she pushed him over did she realize that the groom had dready eyes and a cold body. Aside from being able to breathe, he was no different from a dead person. After a few days of lying on the bed, not eating or drinking anything, he was finally buried. Unfortunately, the bride had become a widow shortly after she married. The second one was Ayan from blacksmith Chen's family. The young girl had just received an engagement when her future husband was killed by a wolf on the second day while he was hunting in the mountains. After she got the news, she also became like the sluggard. Luckily, after some time, her soul-losing disease was cured on its own. However, after this, she went crazy, cheerfully dancing to other people when she was outside. The third one was Ayan's father, blacksmith Xiang. Until now, this had happened to 7 people. Vaivushin considered the situation and figured that it was most likely a soul-consuming spirit, not a soul-consuming beast. Although only one word was different between the two, they were completely different beings. A spirit was a ghost, while a beast was a monster. To him, It was likely that the landslide had destroyed an ancient tomb, and with lightning splitting the coffin open, a resting spirit had been let out. If he looked at the type of coffin and the presence of any seals on it, he could figure out whether or not this was the case. However, the townsfolk of Buddha's feet had already buried the charred coffins somewhere else and laid the corpse to rest again, which meant that there wouldn't be a great deal of evidence left. To go up the mountain, one had to hike up trail that started in the town. Wei Wuxian sat on his donkey and rode up the hill slowly. After a while, a few people walked down with ominous expressions on their faces. Some of them had scars on their faces, and they were talking all at once. With the darkening sky, they all jumped as they saw a person who looked like a hanged ghost approaching them. After cursing, they walked around him quickly. Wei Wuxian turned his head around and thought, maybe they were frustrated because it was a strong prey? He didn't think too much about it and slapped the donkey's buttocks, making it jog faster up the mountain. Coincidentally, he missed the group's whining, which happened shortly afterward. I haven't seen anyone like this. Would the leader of a big clan like that need to fight over a soul-consuming spirit with us? He probably killed a ton of them when he was young. What can we do? He's a sect leader. No matter which clan you choose to offend, you shouldn't offend the Xiang clan. And no matter which person you choose to offend, you shouldn't offend Xiang Chen. Let's just pack up and leave and feel sorry for ourselves. If it was darker, then one would need a torch to move freely about in the mountain's forest. Wei Wuxian walked for a while, but he didn't meet any cultivators. He was quite surprised. Is it possible that half of the clans who came were in Buddha's feet arguing and talking empty words, while the other half could only come back defeated, like the group of people who just passed by? Suddenly, cries for help came from in front of him. Is anyone there? Help us! Both male and female voices could be heard, and all sounded panicked, probably not faked. Cries for help from desolate mountains were usually the works of evil creatures to lure ignorant people into traps. Yet Wei Wuxian was extremely happy. The eviler the creature was, the better it was for him. He directed the donkey toward the direction of the voices, but couldn't find anything around him. As he looked upward, instead of spirits or monsters, it was the rural clan that he met by the field earlier on, hung on the trees by a huge golden web. The middle-aged man was originally patrolling and scouting in the forest with a few others. However, rather than meeting the prey that they had hoped for, they stepped into a net trap, probably set up by some wealthy clan, which was why they were hanging on the trees, complaining and calling for help. After seeing that someone approached, they immediately brightened up, but the hope faded as they saw that it was a lunatic who came. Although the threads of the deity-binding net were thin, the material was fine in quality, making them difficult to break. No matter human, god, demon, spirit, or monster, it would take a long while for the intruder to struggle out, since it could only be broken by a superior magical tool. The lunatic probably didn't even know what it was, much less how to get them out of it. He was about to call others to come help him when the crisp sounds of parting branches and stepping on leaves approached. A boy wearing a light-colored robe emerged from within the dark forest. The boy had a vermilion mark in between his eyebrows, his features delicate yet sharp. He was quite young, around the same age as Lan Chui, still in his adolescence. He carried a bamboo canister of feathered arrows and a luminous sword on his back, holding a long bow in his hand. The embroidery on his clothes was extremely delicate, forming a magnificent white peony in front of his chest. The golden threads glistened against the dark nighttime shades surrounding him. Wei Wuxian silently exclaimed, "How wealthy!" This must have been a young master studying in the Lan Liangjin sect, since the sect was the only one with a white peony as the clan pattern, using the king of all flowers to suggest that they were the king of all cultivators. The vermilion mark implied the meaning of opening the doors toward wisdom and aspiration, illuminating the world with the vermilion light. The young master already had an arrow on his bow and was preparing to shoot it when he realized that the deity binding nets only caught humans. After an initial moment of disappointment, he quickly became annoyed. "I find you idiots every single time. There are more than 400 deity binding nets in the mountain, but you guys have already broken 10 or so. And I haven't even seen the prey yet." Wei Wuxian thought again. How wealthy! A single deity binding net was already expensive, yet he had set up 400 all at once. A smaller clan would have become bankrupt after buying so many. But then, of course, this was the Lan Liangjin sect. However, wasting deity binding webs like this and not caring about what they caught shouldn't be considered night hunting at all. In fact, it was almost as if they were chasing people away, not allowing others the chance of contributing to the process. It seemed that the cultivators who retreated earlier didn't do it because the prey was difficult, but rather because this sect was the one that shouldn't be angered. After a few days of traveling slowly and listening to the intriguing conversations at Buddha's feet, Wei Wuxian gathered a lot of information about the changes to the cultivation world. As the final winner of the 100-year-long cultivational disruption, the Lan Liangjin sect was the head of all clans and sects. Its leader was even referred to as the commander of all cultivators. Even before this, the Jin clan was arrogant, admirers of extravagant splendor. After the years of being at the top, and while strengthening the sect, it had trained all of its disciples to do whatever they wanted to. Even a slightly weaker clan would have to submit to their humiliation, much less a small rural clan such as this one. This was why, although the people trapped in the nets were red with fury because of the mean words of the boy, they could not talk back. The middle-aged man spoke with tolerance. Please, young master, do us a small favor and let us down." The boy was restless with the anxiety of his prey still not arriving, and it was convenient for him to direct his anger towards the country bumpkins. He crossed his arms. "You guys just stay there, in case you mess around and get in my way again. I'll let you down after I catch the spirit-consuming beast, that is, if I still remember you." If they really stayed on the trees for the whole night and happened to bump into the creature that haunted Dafan Mountain, being unable to move, all they could do would be to wait for their souls to be sucked dry. The round-faced girl who gave an apple to Wei Wuxian felt scared and started crying. Wei Wuxian was originally cross-legged on the donkey, but as it heard the sob, his long ears quivered and it suddenly leaped forward. Following the leap came a long bray. If not for how horrible the bray sounded, its unstoppable vigor could almost pass for a purebred horse. Unprepared for this, Wei Wuxian was thrown off of its back, almost injuring his head as he fell. The donkey ran headfirst toward the boy as if it believed that it could knock him off his feet with its head. The boy's arrow was still poised on the bow, conveniently drawing the bow towards its direction. Wei Wuxian didn't want to find a new mount so soon, so he quickly yanked on his reins. The boy took a look at him, a look of shock to suddenly appear on his face. After a second, the shock turned into disdain. His mouth switched. "So it's you." The tone was made of 20% surprise and 80% disgust, making Wei Wuxian blink. The boy spoke again. "Did you lose your marbles after you were thrown back to your village? How could they let you outside when you looked as freaky as this?" Did he just hear something of such significance? Might be it. Wei Wuxian suddenly realized that Mo Xuanyu's father isn't the head of some small sect, but the famous Jing Guanshan. Jing Guanshan was the last leader of the Lan Lianjin sect, having already passed away. On the topic of this man, one sentence could not tell the whole story. He had a fierce wife from a prominent family, and in fact, he was known for being scared of her. However, even if he was scared, it never stopped him from going to other women. No matter how fierce Madame Jin was, it was impossible for her to follow him 24 hours a day. Therefore, from ladies of distinguished statuses to prostitutes in rural areas, if he could get his hands on one, he wouldn't miss a chance. And although he enjoyed casual relationships and flirted everywhere, having an unaccountable amount of illegitimate children, it was extremely easy for him to get bored. After he grew tired of a woman, he would forget about her completely, without any responsibility or whatsoever. Among all of his illegitimate children, there was only one who proved to be exceptionally talented and ended up being taken back, the current leader of the Lan Lianjin sect, Jin Guangyao. Moreover, Jin Guanshan didn't die honorably either. He believed that he was old but vigorous and wanted to challenge himself fooling around with a group of women. However, unfortunately, he failed and passed away during the act. This was too humiliating, and so the Lanling Chin sect told the public that the old leader died from overworking himself. All of the other clans decided to keep silent about the matter and pretended that they didn't know anything. Anyways, those were the real reason behind his fame. During the siege in Luanseng Hill, aside from Jiangchen, Jing Guanshen was the second greatest contributor. And now, Wei Wuxian had taken over the body of his own illegitimate son. He really didn't know if they were even with each other. Seeing that he was spacing out, the boy grew even more annoyed. "Get out of here! It's disgusting just looking at you, you damn gay!" In terms of his generation, it was highly possible for Mo Xuanyu to be an elder to the boy, maybe an uncle. After being humiliated by a junior like this, Wei Wuxian thought that even if not for his own sake, he needed to return the humiliation for Mo Xuanyu's body. What an attitude! I suppose that you didn't have a mother to teach you. Hearing his words, two raging flames sparked in the boy's eyes. He unsheathed the sword on his back and threatened, "What did you say?" The blade of the sword shone a golden light. It was a rare sword of high quality. Most clans probably couldn't get a small piece of it even if they spent their whole life saving for it. Wei Wuxian examined it attentively, somehow thinking that the sword seemed familiar to him. Then again, he had seen his share of gold, top-notch swords. He didn't think too much about it and began to spin a tiny cloth bag that he held in his hand. It was a makeshift spirit-locking bag that he had created a few days ago using the scraps and pieces of things. As the boy wielded the sword and came toward him, he fished a piece of human-shaped paper out of the spirit-locking bag. He shifted to the side, avoiding the attack, and slapped the paper onto his opponent's back. The boy's movements were already fast, but Wei Wuxian had done a lot of tripping someone's while slapping a talisman onto his back, which meant that he was faster. The boy suddenly felt his torso become numb, his back weakening, and he unwillingly collapsed onto the ground, with his sword also falling to the side with a clank. He couldn't get up no matter how hard he tried, as if a mountain was on top of him. On his back there was a ghost who had died from gluttony, crushing him to the point that he couldn't even breathe. Although the ghost was weak, it was completely capable of dealing with brats like this one. Wei Wuxian picked up his sword, weighed it in his hands, and swung towards the direction of the deity binding net, splitting it in half. The family fell to the ground in an awkward way, but they sprinted off without saying anything. The round-faced girl seemed as if she wanted to thank him, but she was pulled away by an elder who was scared that young Master Jin would hate them even more. The boy on the ground was fuming. "You damn gay! Good for you, taking this sort of wrong path because you didn't have enough spiritual powers to do anything. Watch out for your life. Do you know who came today? Today I Although the cultivation method that he used in the past was often criticized and in the long term it harmed the cultivator's health, it could be mastered quickly. It was also especially attractive because there were no limitations as to the cultivator's spiritual powers or talent, making it so that there were always people who secretly practiced it to find a shortcut. The boys presumed that after being chased away from the Lanlianjin sect, Mo Xuanyu had chosen the dishonorable path, which was a reasonable conclusion to draw, saving Wei Wuxian from a lot of unnecessary trouble. The boy pushed on the ground but couldn't get up even after a few tries. His face was scarlet and he gritted his teeth. "If you don't stop, I'm gonna tell my uncle, and you're gonna wait for your death." Wei Wuxian wondered. "Why is it your uncle, not your dad?" "Who's your uncle again?" A voice suddenly came from behind him, a mixture of being bitter and cold. "I am his uncle. Do you have any last words?" Hearing the voice, all of the blood from Wei Wuxian's body traveled to his head and drained away a moment later. The good thing was that his face was already a pile of white. A shade whiter would not make too much of a difference. A violet-clothed youth approached in confident steps, his jianshe robe flowing smoothly and his hand pressing on the hilt of his sword. A silver bell hung on by his waist, although it made no sound as he walked. The young man had thin brows and almond eyes. His features were handsome in a sharp way, and his eyes held a composed vigor with a slight intention of attack, appearing to be two bolts of lightning as he stared. He stood 10 steps away from Wei Wuxian, his expression resembling a horned arrow with a bow ready to be released at any moment. Even his posture emitted an air of arrogance and overconfidence. He frowned. "Jinlian, why did you linger for so long? Do you really need me to come and pick you up? Look at what a horrible situation you are in right now. And get up." After the initial numbing of his head, Wei Wuxian quickly realized what was going on. He curled a finger inside his sleeve and made the piece of paper retreat. Jinlian felt his back lighten and immediately rolled up, grabbing his sword in the process. He shifted near Chen and pointed at Wei Wuxian accusingly. "I'm gonna break your legs." With the pair of uncle and nephew standing beside each other, it was clear that they shared a close resemblance, probably able to pass for brothers. Jiang Chen moved his finger and the paper doll swiftly flew out of Wei Wuxian's hand and into his own. After taking one look at it, hostility came over his face. He pressured his fingers and the paper was ignited, burning to dust with the screams of dark spirits. Jiang Chen spoke grimly. "Break his legs? Haven't I told you? If you this sort of evil and cruel practice, kill the cultivator and feed him to your dogs." Wei Wuxian couldn't even attempt to grab his donkey, backing away at rapid speed. He thought that after so many years, no matter how much hatred Jiang Chen had held for him, it would have disappeared long ago. He didn't expect that not only did it not disappear, it became richer, as if it was a jar of aged alcohol. At the present time, his hatred had grown to affect even people who cultivated like him. With someone backing him up, Jin Liang's attacks became more aggressive. Wei Wuxian slid 2 fingers into the spirit-locking bag, about to take something out, when suddenly the blue glare of a sword slashed out like lightning. It collided with Jin Liang's sword, breaking the powerful sword's golden rays in an instant. It wasn't because of the quality of the swords, but rather the great disparity in the strength of the persons using the swords. Wei Wuxian had originally calculated the timing, but his movements were suddenly interrupted by the sword's glare, causing him to trip. He fell toward the ground, right on top of a pair of snow-white boots. After pausing for a moment, he slowly lifted his head. What first came into his sight was a long, slender blade, crystalline and translucent, as if it was made of ice. In the cultivation world, this sword was one of the most famous ones. Wei Wuxian had experienced its powers countless times, including both battles fought beside it and against it. The hilt of the sword was forged from pure silver that had been refined with secret techniques. The blade of the sword was extremely thin, almost transparent, sending forth the cold breaths of ice and snow. However, at the same time, it could cut through iron like cutting through mud. This was why, although the sword looked light, as if it could fly away instant, it was actually quite heavy, unable to be wielded by the average person. Its name was Beijing. The blade turned, and the clank of the sword being inserted back into the scabbard sounded from above Wei Wuxian. At the same time, Jiang Qun's voice came from afar. "And I was wondering who it was." "So it is you, second young Master Lan." The pair of white boots passed around Wei Wuxian and calmly walked 3 steps forward. Wei Wuxian raised his head and got up. As he walked past the former, slightly brushing their shoulders, he made eye contact with him for a short moment, pretending that it was unintentional. He had an aura of smooth moonlight. The 7-stringed sitar that he carried on his back was narrower than most. Its body was black, made using wood of soft color. The man wore a forehead ribbon with cloud patterns. His skin was fair, features both refined and elegant, as if he was a piece of polished jade. The color of his eyes was specially light, like they were made of colored glass, causing his gaze to be overly distant. His expression held the traces of frost and snow, stern to the degree of being stiff, unwavering even as he saw Wei Wuxian's ridiculous face. There wasn't a single speck of dust or wrinkled spot on him, from his head to his feet. It was impossible to find any fault with his appearance. Even so, 2 capitalized words jumped into Wei Wuxian's mind. Morning clothes. Morning clothes indeed, although all of the clans in the cultivation world used extravagant words to describe the Gusolan sect's uniform as the best-looking uniform, and Lao Wanji as an incomparable beauty who only appeared once in a blue moon. Nothing could help the bitter facial expression that made him look as though his wife had passed away. In an unlucky year, enemies would often find their paths to cross. Good news always traveled alone, but one disaster always followed the next. Thus, the situation right now. Lao Wanji was silent, staring straight ahead, standing motionlessly in front of Jiang Chen. Jiang Chen was already exceptionally handsome, but as they stood face to face with each other, he still seemed a few degrees inferior. He raised one brow and spoke. Han Guanjun, you sure live up to your reputation of being wherever the chaos is. So, you had time to come to this remote area today? Powerful cultivators from prominent clans usually didn't care to pay attention to lower-level praise. However, Lao Wanji was an exception. He never cared for the prey of a night hunt and wouldn't refuse to go just because the creature was not threatening enough to increase his fame. If anyone wanted help, he would be there. He had been like this ever since he was young. Being wherever the chaos is was the comment that the public gave him for his night hunts and also praise for his moral character. Right now, Jiang Chen really didn't seem too polite as he said the words in such a tone. Even the juniors who came following Lao Wanji didn't seem comfortable hearing it. Lan Jiangyi spoke straightforwardly. Isn't Sect Leader Jiang here as well? Jiang Chen replied grimly. Do you really think that you should butt in when your seniors are conversing? The Gusolan sect has always been known for its respectful conduct. Is this really how it teaches its disciples? Lao Wanji seemed as if he didn't want to engage in conversation, throwing Lan Zichui a look. The latter understood and told the juniors to speak among themselves. Afterward, he spoke to Jin Liang. Young Master Jin, night hunts have always been fair competitions amongst the different clans and sects. However, to set up nets all over Dafan Mountain is clearly hindering the cultivators, causing them to fall into traps. Is this or is this not against the rule of night hunting? Jin Liang's grim expression was exactly the same as his uncle's. What can I do? It was their own fault for stepping into the traps. I'll solve everything after I finish capturing the prey. Lao Wanji frowned. Jin Liang was about to speak again, but he suddenly realized that, shockingly, he could neither open his mouth nor make any sounds. Seeing that, Jin Liang's upper and lower lips became inseparable as if they were glued together, anger appeared on Jiang Chen's face. The sloppy manners that he upheld before this were all gotten rid of. You, with the lance ending. What do you mean by this? It's not your turn to disciple Jin Liang yet? So, release the spell now. The silence spell was used by the land sect to reprimand its disciples. Wei Wuxian had suffered a ton from this little trick. Although it wasn't anything too complicated or obscure, only people of the Lan clan could release the spell. If one wanted to forcibly speak, it would result in either their lips being ripped bloody or a hoarse throat for a couple of days. The only solution was to stay silent and reflect upon the wrongdoings until the time limit of the punishment was over. Lan Ziche spoke. "Sect Leader Xiang, there is no need for anger. As long as he does not break the spell forcefully, it would release on its own after 30 minutes. Before Jiang Chen opened his mouth to speak, a purple-clothed man in the Jiang set's uniform ran towards them from within the forest. He shouted, "Sect leader!" However, after seeing Lao Wanji's presence, he hesitated. Jiang Chen spoke sterically. "Tong, is there more bad news?" The man spoke in a low voice. "Not long ago, a blue sword flew over and destroyed the deity blinding nets that you had set up." Jiang Chen glanced at Lao Wanji harshly. His displeasure plastered all over his face. "How many were broken?" The man replied carefully, "All of them." "That's more than 400. Jiang Chen seethed with anger. He didn't expect the journey to be this unlucky. Originally, he came to help Jin Liang out. Jin Liang would be turning 15 this year, the age of which he should already be making his debut and starting to compete with the juniors of other clans. Jiang Chen considered the decision carefully before choosing the Fan Mountain as the location of the hunt. He also set up nets everywhere and threatened the cultivators of other clans, showing them the consequences so they would retreat, in order to let Jin Liang take the top prize without anyone fighting against him. Although 400 deity binding nets were a whopping price, it wasn't too much for the Yumenjiang sect. Nonetheless, losing the nets were a small matter, but losing face was not. With Lao Wanji's action, Jiang Chen felt a whirlpool of anger at the bottom of his heart, rising higher by every second. He narrowed his eyes, his left hand casually stroking the ring on his right hand's index finger. This was a dangerous sign. Everyone knew that the ring was a menacing, strong, magical weapon. Whenever clan leader Xiang started touching it, it meant that he had the intent to kill. However, after stroking it for a while, Jiang Chen compelled himself to restrain his hostility. Although he was displeased, as the leader of a sect, he needed to take more things into consideration, which meant that he couldn't be as impulsive as Jin Liang. After the fall of the Qinghe sect among three great sects, the Lan Lian Jing sect and the Gusulan sect were quite close due to the personal reasons between the two leaders. By leading the Yumenjiang sect alone, he was already in an isolated situation among the three. Hang Wenjun or Lam Wenji was quite a prestigious cultivator, while his elder brother Zewu Jun or Lan Shichen was the leader of the Gusulan sect. The two brothers had always been on good terms with each other. It was best to not openly dispute with Lao Wanji. Also, Jian Chen's sword, Sandu, had never made actual contact with Lao Wanji's sword, Bichen, and it was not yet decidable whose hands would the deer die on. Although he owned the powerful ring, Sidian, a family heirloom of his, Lao Wanji's sitar, Wanji, was also known for its abilities. The thing that Jian Chen hated the most was to be disadvantageous during a fight. Without complete confidence in his success, he would not consider fighting with Lao Wanji. Jian Chen slowly took away his left hand, ceasing to stroke his ring. It seemed as if Lao Wanji was determined to take part in this matter, so it wouldn't help if he continued to play the antagonist. Jian Chen made the decision to, for the time being, owe him a favor, and turned around to see Jin Liang still covering his mouth angrily. Han Guanjun wants to punish you, so just let him do it for this once. It's not easy for him either to discipline juniors from other clans. His tone was sarcastic, but it wasn't clear who he was mocking. Lao Wanji never fought to win in his way with words, and looked as if he didn't hear anything. Jian Chen turned again, his words covered with thorns. Why are you still standing there, waiting for the prey to come and throw itself onto your sword? If today you don't catch the creature hunting Dafan Mountain, don't come to see me ever again. Jin Liang threw Wei Wuxian a tough look, but was too scared to look at Lao Wanji, the person who had silenced him. He put his sword back into its scabbard, saluted the two seniors, and retreated with the bow in his hand. Lan Zishui spoke. Sect Leader Jian, the Gusulan sect will retain the exact number of spirit binding nets that had been destroyed. Jian Chen sneered. No need. He chose the opposite direction and walked down calmly. The man who had come from the forest followed behind him, pulling a long face because he knew that it'd be impossible to escape a lecture when he returned. After their figures disappeared, Lan Jianye spoke. How could the sect leader act like this? Only afterward did he remember that Lan clan's rule of not talking behind others' backs. He looked meekly at Han Guanjun and shut his mouth. Lan Zichui smiled softly toward Wei Wuxian. Young Master Mo, we meet again. As Wei Wuxian pulled the corners of his mouth, Lao Wanji spoke again. Do your tasks. The command was simplistic and clear, without any fancy vocabulary for decoration. The juniors finally remembered the reason behind why they came to Dafan Mountain. They gathered their thoughts and respectfully waited for further instructions. After a moment, Lao Wanji spoke again. Do what you can. Don't force anything. The voice was deep and alluring. If one was too near, the tip of their heart would tremble. The juniors replied mannerly, afraid to linger for too long, and walked into the depths of the forest. Wei Wuxian thought that, undeniably, Jian Chen and Lan Chan were extremely different from each other. Even their advice for juniors were the complete opposite. While thinking, he suddenly saw Lao Wanji give an almost unnoticeable nod to him. he was quite surprised. Ever since a young age, Lawanji had been so prim and proper that it was painful to watch. He had always been solemn and stiff, as if he had never been lively before. He couldn't let a single grain of sand appear in his eyes, which was why he had never approved of Wei Wuxian cultivating the dark path. Lan Xichui had probably informed Lawanji of his suspicious behavior in Mo village already. Even so, he had nodded in acknowledgement, probably thanking him for helping out the juniors from the land sect. Without thinking, Wei Wuxian immediately returned a salute. When he looked up again, Lawanji had already disappeared. After pausing a second, he turned around to travel down the mountain. No matter what prey haunted Dafan Mountain, he couldn't take it. Wei Wuxian could fight for it against anyone except for Jin Liang. Why did it turn out to be Jin Liang? With so many disciples in the Jin sect, he really didn't expect that the person he met happened to be Jin Liang. If he knew, he definitely wouldn't mock Jin Liang for having no mother to teach him. If someone else had said the same words to Jin Liang, he would teach them about what it means to bring misfortune upon oneself with careless talk. Yet, the person who had said so turned out to be himself. After standing still for a moment, Wei Wuxian raised his hand and gave himself a slap on the face. The slap was both loud and hard, causing his right cheek to sting. Suddenly, shuffling sounds came from a thicket on the side, and Wei Wuxian saw a donkey emerge from within. As he dropped his hand, the donkey actually approached on its own, unlike other times. Wei Wuxian pulled on its long ears and forced a smile. "You wanted to save the damsel in distress, but asked me to be the hero to the rescue." The donkey whined, just as a wave of cultivators approached from the bottom of the hill. After the 400 or so spirit-binding nets were destroyed by Lawanji's sword, the hesitant cultivators in Buddha's feet all rushed up again. Everyone here was probably Jin Liang's opponent. Wei Wuxian considered for a moment about whether or not to make them retreat again with force, but after thinking about it, he ended up silently walking out of the way, letting them pass. The disciples from different sects wearing different colored uniforms complained as they walked. Both the Jin sect and the Jian sect spoiled young Master Jin too much. He is still so young, but he is already this arrogant and rude. If they let him have the Landlian Jin sect, who knows what chaos would happen. I don't know if we'd even survive. Wei Wuxian slowed his pace. A soft-hearted female cultivator sighed. How can they not spoil him? He lost both of his parents at such a young age. Younger sister, that's not how it works. So what if both his parents died? There are tons of who lost both of their parents. If everyone acted like him, then what would happen? I'm surprised that Wei Wuxian was cruel enough to harm her. Jin Liang's mother was Jianshan's elder sister from birth, the sister who brought him up. It really was too bad for Jia Yanli, bringing up a wolf that bites the owner's hand. Jinsei Xuan had it even worse. Just because he had something to do with Wei Wuxian, he ended up like that. Why does Wei Wuxian have to do with everyone? Indeed, have you heard him being close with anyone other than the mad dogs that he raised? His enemies were everywhere and he did wrong to everyone. Even with Han Wenjun, they were like fire and water, hating each other. Speaking of it, today, if it wasn't for Han Wenjun, after walking for a while, the gurgling sounds of a running stream came into Wei Wuxian's ears. He didn't hear this when he came up. Wei Wuxian finally realized that he walked the wrong path down the mountain and onto another one that forked off. Holding the reins of the donkey, he stood beside the running water. The moon could be seen high in the sky, with no branches or leaves on the banks of the stream, fragments of white reflected over the surface. In the reflection, Wei Wuxian saw a face, ever changing from the flow of the water. He slammed his palm into the water, dissolving the ridiculous features. He lifted his dripping wet palms and wiped away the powder on his face. A handsome, graceful youth appeared in the reflections of the water. He looked as pure as if he had been cleansed by moonlight, with smooth brows, bright eyes, and lips curving slightly upward. Yet, as he lowered his head to stare at himself, the drops of water hanging from his lashes rolled off as if they were drops of tears. It was a young and unfamiliar face, not the Yiling patriarch who had overturned the world and killed thousands, Wei Wuxian. After taking a few more looks at this face, Wei Wuxian wiped his face again and rubbed his eyes. He sat beside the stream with a thud. It wasn't as if he couldn't withstand the words of attack. After all, back when he made the decision, he fully understood the situation that he had to face. Ever since then, he had reminded himself of the Yumengjian sect's motto, "Do it even if it was impossible." However, although he thought that his heart was like a stone, in the end he was still human, not some emotionless grass or plant. The donkey seemed as if knew that he wasn't in a great mood, and for once it wasn't being loud out of impatience. A moment of silence passed, and it turned around to leave. Wei Wuxian sat by the stream, not responding at all. It turned around to look, throwing its hooves onto the ground, but Wei Wuxian still paid no attention to it. The donkey had to come back sulkily, biting and tugging on the corner of Wei Wuxian's collar. He could choose to go, and he could choose not to go. Seeing that the donkey had went as far as to use his mouth, Wei Wuxian decided to follow him. The donkey took him to a few trees and circled around an area of grass. In the grass, there lay a Xiang bag with a ragged golden net hanging above it. It probably fell off as an unlucky cultivator struggled their way out. Wei Wuxian picked up the bag and opened it. There were quite a few items in it, such as gourds of medicinal liquor, talismans, miniature demon-reflecting mirrors, and so on. He fished around for some time and happened to pull out a talisman. Immediately, a ball of fire appeared in his hand. The burning item was a gloom-burning talisman, which, like its name, used dark energy as fuel. It would burn automatically if it made contact with dark energy. The more energy there was, the stronger the flame was. It lit up as soon as it was taken out, meaning that there was a spirit not far away from Wei Wuxian. Seeing the light of the fire, Wei Wuxian held it to detect the spirit's direction, watching attentively. When he turned to the east, the fire weakened. When he turned to the west, the fire suddenly intensified. He walked a few steps towards the direction and saw a white stooping figure appear under a tree. The talisman had finished burning and the ashes fell from his fingertips. An old man was sitting with his back to him, speaking in faint murmurs. Wei Wuxian slowly approached. The words that the old man murmured became clear. "It hurts, it hurts." Wei Wuxian asked, "Where does it hurt?" The old man answered, "Head, my head." Wei Wuxian replied, "Let me take a look at it." He walked a few steps to the side of the old man and saw a bloodied large hole on his forehead. This was a ghost, probably killed with a weapon, which was smashed onto his head. He was dressed in a burial robe made with fine material and craftsmanship, meaning that he had already been encoffined and buried properly. This wasn't the soul that a living human had lost. However, ghosts like this shouldn't have appeared on Dafan Mountain. Wei Wuxian did not find an explanation to this implausible scenario. Feeling quite worried, he jumped onto the donkey's back, slapped it with a shout, and rode toward the direction of where Jinliang came up the mountain. In the area of the ancient tombs, there were lots of cultivators who wandered around in hope of a hurry crashing into the tea trunk. Somebody dared to hold a spirit attraction flag, but only attracted a bunch of dark spirits who wept despairingly. Wei Wuxian pulled on the reins, scanned around, and asked in a loud, clear voice, "Excuse me, and sorry for the interruptions, but where did the young masters from the Jin clan and the Lan clan go?" Sure enough, after washing his face, people actually acknowledged him. One cultivator answered, "They left here for Goddess Temple." Wei Wuxian spoke. "Goddess Temple?" The rural clan from back then had sneaked up the mountain again and joined the group of night hunters after hearing that all of the deity binding nets were destroyed. The middle-aged man recognized his clothing and the grimacing donkey, realizing that he was lunatic who'd saved them earlier. He felt quite awkward and pretended that nothing had happened. Nonetheless, the round-faced girl showed him the path. "Over there. It's a divine temple in a cave on the mountain. Wei Wuxian inquired again. Which deity is the temple built for? The round-faced girl spoke. I think it's a natural stone statue of a goddess. Wei Wuxian nodded. Thank you. After the conversation, he immediately ran toward the direction of Goddess Temple.